Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Carlos Tavares breaking his silence on his departure from Stellantis. Now, the former CEO of Stellantis has been very quiet the last couple of weeks. Mind you, he left in early December. It's only been like a week and a half since he's been gone. But nonetheless, we're getting his first take on how he left the company. Now, mind you, reports have said that, basically morale has been shot to hell. He's been cost cutting too much. He had no long-term plan. The board was sick of hearing cost-cutting stuff for short-term, but no long-term plan, especially going into, his departure officially in the first part of 2026 when his contract was up. He wasn't going to renew it. So they just got sick and tired of hearing the excuses, and the company's stock options have just been falling through the roof. Basically, they're down almost, 49% over since March in their value of their stock. So something had to be done. And like what I said, with no long-term plan, he was out the door. So a lot of people are happy about that, but it was funny because he sat down and talked with a Portuguese magazine called Expresso. Now, mind you, Tavares actually lives in Portugal, so it made sense it came from a Portuguese magazine. But he had some pretty interesting things on how he described his departure from Stellantis, and I want to go over it. I wrote an article about it the other day for Mopar Insiders, but I wanted to go through it for the channel. So I'm just going to kind of read what I wrote, but it's kind of interesting. So Tavares, who had led Stellantis since its creation from the merger of Fiat Chrysler Automobiles and PSA Group, described his move as admirable and necessary to safeguard the company's alignment. A company on this scale cannot function without alignment at the strategic level, he stated, citing Stellantis' workforce of 250,000 employees, its $200 billion in annual revenue, and its diverse portfolio of 15 brands. Okay? Mind you, Stellantis was formed with 14 brands, but what is that 15th brand? The 15th brand is being its joint venture with Chinese startup Leapmotor. Now, if you remember, all he has been talking about for like the last year is this Leapmotor brand. We're bringing them to Europe. He wanted to bring them to the U.S. He was going to have their cars built in Mexico and brought up here. But that's when we started seeing like the Biden administration, especially because of the pressure from the UAW, said, hey, we're going to put large tariffs on all Chinese-built, EVs, even if they come from Mexico. Trump has said the same thing. Justin Trudeau said the same thing up in Canada, to the point where Tesla, which was sending their EVs because Canada's, obviously their market's more expensive because of their inflation rate and how their economy's going, Elon was actually building cars in Shanghai, Teslas, instead of California, and sending them to Mexico so he could have cheaper cars. But after that announcement came through, he said, hey, we're going to build all the cars at Texas and send them up. So Elon was going to take a loss a little bit on profit, but he was going to still, basically go along with what the changes were from the Chinese EV thing. So it didn't affect just Chinese manufacturers; it affected the American manufacturer who builds stuff in China. So kind of funny that way. But what he did was he launched this EV company in Europe. And there's models starting to roll off. They're actually building cars in Poland alongside the Jeep Avenger, which has been a huge success for them there. But they're bringing out a city car that is, it's okay on range. It's about on par with like the little Fiat 500e. But the problem is it's sitting in dealers alongside the 500e, which has had terrible sales right now. This car's a 4-door. But it's not attractive, and he's putting Chinese products against the core Stellantis vehicles in the same showrooms. So that alone, he's been talking about how the Chinese manufacturers are going to dominate the market. So what does he do? He brings in his own Chinese brand, because that makes sense. So anyways, back to his little article. He said, while he refrained from detailing the exact points of contention with the board, so he didn't want to admit that he was wrong and they forced him out. Insiders have suggested that the disagreements over ambitious targets set by Tavares played a key role. Some of the board members reportedly viewed these goals as either unattainable or harmful to the company's long-term stability. So there was no long-term strategy. There was all these like, hey, we're going to keep making cost cuts because as long as we can take and show that we're, doing cost cuts, we'll save the company. The problem was they've made record amounts of money in the last couple of years, and they should invest that back in the company to bring new products and stuff. And what the board was finding out was he wasn't, with his long-term plan, it was not only affecting the company right now, but it was affecting their future product. Because we're seeing pushback from EVs in Europe right now, and we're seeing pushback from EVs obviously in the US. So if you remember his Dare Forward 2030 program, that his whole idea of how the company was going to go, by 2030, Stellantis was going to sell 100% BEV in Europe. And right now, there's a huge push from BEV to hybrids. So like right now, the Jeep Avenger, which is one of the best-selling vehicles in Europe, is actually selling better as an e-hybrid than it is a BEV. And then if you look here in the US, he was planning on having over 50% of our sales being BEV, but we don't even have the infrastructure even like Europe does. So there's a huge pushback. It just wasn't going to happen. The board just said like, hey, we're pushing all these EV stuff and there's nothing really working out. So he didn't have an answer for him. Tavares highlighted his focus on ensuring the company's continued success despite the strategic divide. The main concern was to protect Stellantis from all or any risk that misalignment could bring. So keep in mind, I posted this picture here. He was working at. He actually invested a huge amount of money in Archer, which is this electric aircraft company. And I'm talking huge amounts of money where he was cutting money in the U.S., cutting jobs and like all this investment in the U.S. to basically this was a U.S. company, but it was for aircraft. It had nothing to do with the automaker. So, I mean, that money could have been used at developing new products and that. So that was another thing. Stellantis has faced challenges in recent months, including slumping North American sales and profit warning issued in September, which some attributed to his price strategies under Tavares' leadership. So we know that prices on all of Stellantis' products have gone up tremendously since COVID. And what happened during COVID? The formation of Stellantis. So, like for example, I bought a 2019 Ram 1500 back in May of 2019, right? That same exact truck. It was a fully loaded truck, Laramie Sport. The only thing I can't get today on the truck is obviously the Hemi. But if I do the Hurricane engine, that same exact truck is priced at $12,000 more. It's nuts. So everybody's vehicles are getting higher and higher in price, and that was okay for him because it didn't matter if they built less, because if they built less vehicles, let's say they sell less, there's more profit in the vehicles that they sold, but if they sold less vehicles, they didn't have to run the production line as much. And he liked that because you didn't have to pay your employees, you don't have to you have all the extra electricity. That was his whole plan. So describing the current state of the automotive sector as entering a Darwinian period, Tavares acknowledged the pressures facing automakers in a rapidly changing environment. He said, when you're in a storm, you have to steer the boat according to the waves. He said, suggesting that adaptability is critical in navigating the industry's challenges. So he said he was navigating. He wasn't even navigating. He was heading right into the waves. He wasn't trying to navigate away from them. Every automaker makes decisions to say, hey, we're going to do this, except for Stellantis. Like, we're going to push back on EVs and go for hybrids. Nope, not us. We're going to push EVs. And that was all because he didn't want to pay out for emissions credits to build what products people wanted. He thought that this automaker will basically support itself by building products that, people will just buy the products that it builds. That's not how an automaker works. You're going to buy products that are best suited for you, not what is best suited for the automaker. So what he said was, despite the abrupt end of his tenure, Tavares explained no regret about his decisions as CEO. So even so, that narcissist wouldn't even take and admit that he screwed up. Not at all. He wouldn't even admit it. This is what he said, "I would act the same way if I could go back in time," he affirmed, maintaining that his actions were always guided by a desire to protect Stellantis. So, nonetheless, it's kind of a funny ordeal because we know what happened. It's been very verbal. He's the one who discontinued the Hemi because he didn't want to have to pay for emissions credits. He's the one who's been pushing the EV stuff to pay for the Hemi emissions credits from a couple years back because he doesn't want to pay for those credits from Tesla. Those credits from Tesla, Stellantis spent billions of dollars, if not FCA, okay? FCA and Stellantis spent billions of dollars on buying emissions credits from Tesla. The whole point was they were making billions and billions of dollars with those vehicles. Everybody wanted Hemi engines in their product. Keep in mind, the Hurricane engine, which is out now, was supposed to replace the 5.7 and 6.4, but the Hellcat engine and the high output Hellcat engine, or the Demon motor, or the Red Eye engine, whatever you want to call, was supposed to continue on. So it's very interesting how he perceived this. We've seen Ford come out and publicly say, "Hey, we're going to offer V8 no matter what." They just, like Jim Farley had a thing the other day saying that he was going to provide a V8 in the Mustang and a 6-speed manual transmission until it's no longer legal. And the reason why they could do that is because they offset the costs with Ford F-150 Lightning and Ford Mustang Mach-E production. Those electric vehicles gave them enough credits so they could build V8 stuff again. So it'll be very interesting to see. We've already seen that Stellantis, within a day of Tavares quitting, they actually joined other they reapplied and rejoined other European dealers fighting EU regulations. Originally, Carlos Tavares said, "Hey, we're going to go all EV, and we don't need to be with you guys." And they kind of abandoned that. Well, within one day of Tavares being out, now all of a sudden we're seeing change. And there's not even a new CEO yet. So this goes to show you how much poison this guy was and how narcissistic this guy was for the company. So it's amazing. Even since he left, I've seen people that I know that work for Chrysler are so happy. The morale at the Chrysler Tech Center has been so terrible, and especially with constant firings. UAW workers that I know have been so happy that this guy is gone because it's a constant. I don't know when I'm going to be cut next, who's going to be cut and when they're going to be cut next. So that alone says a lot for the company. That one person being fired or forced out or whatever, resigning, whatever you want to say, can change the whole atmosphere going forward. And now the board has made switches and put people in place until they find a CEO to kind of put out some of these fires, because he had fires on the Italian side, the French side, and the U.S. Between the unions, the governments, everything. There's so many fires within the company. The Italians were looking at selling old brand names that were no longer used, that were owned by Stellantis, meaning Fiat Chrysler, to old Fiat names to the Chinese, just so they would build cars there, because almost all the Fiat products aren't built in Italy anymore, except for the 500e. So yeah, you got the Panda, and it's built in Poland. Or not Poland, but yeah, and part of the Panda is built in Italy, but the new Panda isn't built there. It's going to be very interesting to see what's coming forward with this company, especially with Tavares out. And we've seen how, like I said, narcissistic that he was, especially even after his departure. So we'll see. Stay tuned. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.